Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's dawn and watched the stars through the main window. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. They had been traveling through deep space for 3 weeks now, mapping new systems for Earth's growing colonies. It was peaceful work, and Jake liked it that way. The peace ended when the communication panel started flashing red. Lieutenant Lisa Park turned from her station with wide eyes. "Captain, we're getting a transmission. It's coming from Zalani space." Jake frowned. The Zalani Empire controlled this part of the galaxy, and they had made it very clear that humans were not welcome in their territory. First contact 50 years ago had not gone well. The Zalani saw humans as primitive and dangerous. They had refused to share technology or allow human ships through their space. "Are you sure it's from them?" Lisa checked her readings twice. "Yes, sir. The signal matches their encryption patterns. But Captain, there's something strange about this message. It's not being sent to Earth Command. It's being sent directly to us." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The Zalani never spoke directly to human ships. They always went through official channels on Earth. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, and Jake saw something he had never expected to see. A Zalani commander appeared on the screen, but this was not the proud warrior race that humans had met before. The alien's blue scales looked dull, and his large black eyes showed something that Jake had never seen in a Zalani before. Fear. "Human vessel," the Zalani spoke in heavily accented English. "I am High Commander Vexhai of the Zalani Defense Fleet. I speak to you now not as an enemy, but as one who faces extinction." The commander's voice shook as he spoke. "We need your help." Jake looked around the bridge. His crew stared at the screen in shock. Commander Lisa Park, the ship's science officer, moved closer to her instruments. Chief Engineer Maria Santos stopped what she was doing and turned to watch. Even the newest crew member, young corpsman Danny Wright, stopped his duties to listen. High Commander Vexhai continued his message. 3 months ago, we made a terrible mistake. Our scientists were exploring an ancient ruin on the edge of our territory. They found something sleeping there, something that should have stayed buried forever. The alien's hand shook as he spoke. "We awakened the Devourers," Lisa gasped. She had studied ancient galactic history, and she knew the legends. The Devourers were supposed to be myths, stories told to frighten children. They were said to be creatures that ate entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty space behind. "The Devourers are real," Vexhai said, as if reading her thoughts. "They are not like us. They do not think as individuals. They are a hive mind that exists only to consume. They eat everything. Plants, animals, even the atmosphere of planets. When they are finished with a world, nothing remains." The screen showed images that made Jake's stomach turn. Planets that had once been green and full of life were now gray and dead. Ships the size of cities floated through space, their black hulls covering the stars. These were the Devourer vessels, and they moved through Zalani space like a plague. "They have already taken 17 of our worlds," Vexhai continued. "Our military fought them with everything we had. Our best ships, our strongest weapons, our bravest warriors. None of it mattered. The Devourers learn from every battle. They adapt to our weapons. They grow stronger with each world they consume." Jake watched as the screen showed the remains of Zalani battle fleets. Ships that had once seemed impossibly advanced were now floating wreckage. The Zalani had always been proud of their military power. They had ruled this part of space for thousands of years. Seeing them defeated so completely was shocking. "Our shield worlds are gone," Vexhai said. "Our outer colonies have been evacuated, but there is nowhere for our people to go. The Devourers move faster than our ships. They will reach our core systems within days." The commander paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "We are begging you for help." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The proud Zalani Empire, which had treated humans like children playing with dangerous toys, was now asking for rescue. Jake remembered the trade disputes, the blocked shipping lanes, the condescending messages from Zalani officials who acted like humans were too stupid to understand complex politics. Maria Santos spoke first. "Captain, they wouldn't ask unless they were truly desperate. The Zalani would rather die than admit they need help from humans." Lisa was studying the data that came with the message. "The energy readings from these Devourer ships are unlike anything in our records. They're not using technology as we understand it. It's almost like they're alive." Jake thought about Earth, about the colonies, about all the human worlds that existed beyond Zilani space. If the Devourers finished with the Zilani Empire, would they stop there? Or would they continue, consuming everything in their path until they reached human space? There's more, Vexhai said on the screen. We know what you must be thinking. We have not been friends to your people. We have blocked your expansion and refused your request for alliance. We called you primitive and dangerous. The alien looked directly into the camera. We were wrong. We have watched your species for 50 years, and we see now what we failed to understand before. You help others even when they have hurt you. You save those who cannot save themselves. This is not weakness as we once believed. This is strength. The message began to repeat, but Jake had heard enough. He turned to his communication officer. Open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Within minutes, Admiral Chris Hayes appeared on the screen from Earth. The Admiral was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes, but his voice was still strong. Captain Morrison, we received your transmission. This Zilani message has been sent to every human ship in this sector. Earth Command is already meeting about this situation. What are your orders, sir? Jake asked. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment. The President is addressing the Earth Assembly right now. But I can tell you this much, Captain. If we help the Zilani, it won't be because they deserve it. It will be because it's the right thing to do. Jake nodded. He had served under Admiral Hayes for 10 years, and he knew the man's character. Will we be sending battle fleets, sir? The Admiral smiled, but it was a sad smile. No, Captain. We're going to do something that might surprise everyone, including the Zilani. We're going to show them what humanity really means. The communication ended, and Jake was left staring at the stars again. Somewhere in the distance, an ancient enemy was destroying everything in its path, and humanity was about to respond in a way that would change the galaxy forever. President Amy Rodriguez stood before the Earth Assembly, looking out at representatives from every human world. The Great Hall was silent as she prepared to speak. News of the Zilani plea had spread quickly through human space, and everyone wanted to know how humanity would respond. 3 days ago, President Rodriguez began. The Zilani Empire asked for our help, the same empire that has blocked our trade routes, refused our diplomatic overtures, and called us a dangerous species unworthy of respect. She paused, letting her words sink in. They are facing extinction from an ancient enemy called the Devourers, and they have nowhere else to turn. The assembly murmured with mixed reactions. Some representatives looked angry, remembering years of Zilani arrogance. Others seemed thoughtful, considering the implications of letting an entire species die. Many of you believe we should ignore their plea, the president continued. After all, they would not help us if our positions were reversed. Some of you think we should demand payment or political concessions before offering aid. These are reasonable positions, and I understand them completely. Captain Jake Morrison watched the speech from the bridge of the Aurora's dawn. His ship was still in deep space, waiting for orders. Around him, his crew listened with growing tension. However, President Rodriguez said, her voice growing stronger, we are not the Zilani. We do not help people because they deserve it. We help them because they need it. This is what makes us human. This is what makes us different from every other species in the galaxy. The president activated a holographic display showing the Devourer fleet. The images were terrifying. Ships the size of cities consuming entire worlds. The threat these creatures represent extends far beyond Zilani space. If they are not stopped, they will eventually reach our colonies, our worlds, our families. But even if that were not true, even if they posed no threat to us at all, we would still act, because that is who we are. Admiral Chris Hayes was in his office at Earth Command, coordinating the largest mobilization in human history. The response to the president's call for volunteers had been overwhelming. Military personnel, civilian ship captains, doctors, engineers, and ordinary citizens were all volunteering for what had been named Operation Shepherd's Watch. Sir, his aide Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner said, entering the office with a data pad. The volunteer numbers are still climbing. We have over 200 ships committed to the operation, and more joining every hour. Admiral Hayes looked at the numbers with amazement. The original plan had called for 50 ships. Now they had 4 times that number, and civilian vessels were still requesting permission to join. What kind of ships are we getting? Everything, sir, Turner replied. Military vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts. Captain Ben Clark has volunteered his colony transport new Horizon. Dr. Patricia Stone is bringing the hospital ship Mercy's hand. Engineer Rick Thompson is converting his mining vessel into a refugee transport. The Admiral shook his head in wonder. This is not how wars are usually fought, Colonel. With respect, sir, Turner said. This is not a war. It's a rescue mission. Back on Zalani Prime, High Commander Vexhai waited for humanity's response. He had sent the plea 3 days ago, and every hour that passed felt like an eternity. His people were evacuating the outer systems, but there was nowhere for them to go. The Devourer fleet was advancing steadily, consuming everything in its path. Commander, his aide Krenos reported, we're receiving a transmission from human space. It's from their Earth command. Vexhai straightened in his chair. This was it. Either humanity would help, or his people would face extinction alone. Put it through. Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen, his expression serious but not unkind. High Commander Vexhai, I am Admiral Hayes of Earth Command. We have received your message, and President Rodriguez has authorized a full response to your situation. Vexhai felt hope rise in his chest. Admiral, we are grateful for any assistance you can provide. When will your battle fleets arrive? What weapons do you need us to prepare? Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment, and Vexhai wondered if the transmission was experiencing problems. Then the human spoke, and his words were not what the Zalani commander expected. High Commander, we are not sending battle fleets. We are sending something else entirely. Operation Shepherd's Watch is not a military operation. It is a humanitarian mission. Vexhai did not understand. I do not know this word, humanitarian. It means we are coming to save lives, not to fight battles, Admiral Hayes explained. We are bringing evacuation ships, medical supplies, food, shelter, and everything needed to relocate your entire population to safety. The Zalani commander stared at the screen in confusion. You mean to run away? To abandon our worlds to these creatures? No, Admiral Hayes said firmly. We mean to save your people. Every single one of them. We cannot defeat the Devourers in direct combat, but we can move faster than they can. We can evacuate your entire population before they arrive. Vexhai felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope, but also confusion. Why would you risk your ships and your people for us? We have not been friends to humanity. Admiral Hayes smiled, and it was a sad but genuine expression. Because that's what friends do, Commander. They help when help is needed, regardless of the past. The transmission ended, and Vexhai sat in silence for a long time. His aide Krenos waited patiently before speaking. Commander, what did he mean about friends? I think, Vexhai said slowly, we are about to learn something about humanity that we never understood before. On Earth, the preparations continued at an incredible pace. Dr. Linda Foster had left her practice on Europa to join the medical corps. She was boarding a transport ship filled with medical supplies and equipment. Around her, hundreds of other volunteers were doing the same thing. First time on a rescue mission? Asked Captain Sue Williams, the transport commander. Dr. Foster nodded. I've worked in disaster relief on colony worlds, but nothing like this. An entire species facing extinction. She paused. Why are we doing this? The Zalani have never shown us any kindness. Captain Williams checked her equipment one more time before answering. My grandfather fought in the resource wars back in the 22nd century. Earth was divided, nations fighting each other for water and rare minerals. Millions died in those conflicts. She sealed her equipment case. You know what ended those wars? Not superior weapons or clever strategies. It ended when people started helping their enemies instead of fighting them. The transport ship lifted off from Europa's surface, joining the growing convoy that was assembling in Earth's orbit. Captain Morrison watched from the Aurora's dawn as more ships arrived. Military vessels, civilian transports, medical ships, and cargo haulers, all of them crewed by volunteers who were willing to risk their lives for people who had treated them as enemies. Chief Engineer Maria Santos was running final checks on the Aurora's dawn systems. Captain, I've never seen anything like this. The entire human fleet is mobilizing, but we're not bringing weapons. We're bringing hope. Lieutenant Colonel Turner, who had been assigned to the Aurora's dawn as military liaison, was still skeptical. With respect, Captain, hope doesn't stop enemy ships. The Devourers have destroyed the entire Zalani military. What makes us think we can succeed where they failed? Captain Morrison looked out at the growing fleet. Because we're not trying to defeat the Devourers, Colonel. We're trying to save lives. And when it comes to saving lives, humanity has never failed. The last ships joined the convoy, and Admiral Hayes gave the order to depart. 237 ships began moving toward the edge of the solar system, where they would jump to hyperspace and begin the journey to Zilani territory. As they left Earth's gravity well behind, Captain Morrison thought about what they were attempting. An entire species was facing extinction, and humanity's response was not to send weapons or warriors. They were sending doctors and teachers and engineers. They were sending people who believed that every life was worth saving, even the lives of those who had rejected them. The fleet entered hyperspace, and the journey to Zilani space began. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it disappeared completely. Ahead of them lay an ancient enemy that had already destroyed dozens of worlds. But the humans were not afraid. They had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They had each other, and they had a belief that mercy was stronger than vengeance. The Zilani had begged for mercy, but humanity was bringing something even better. They were bringing hope. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Zilani territory, and Captain Jake Morrison immediately understood why High Commander Vexhai had sounded so desperate. The space around them was filled with the wreckage of Zilani ships. Pieces of once mighty warships drifted past the Aurora's dawn like metal tombstones. "Captain," Lieutenant Lisa Park called from her station, "I'm reading massive energy signatures from the inner system. The Devourer fleet is already there." On the main screen, Jake could see the Devourer ships in the distance. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The vessels looked more like living creatures than spacecraft, with dark hulls that seemed to pulse and writhe. Some were as large as moons, others small and quick like predatory fish. "Sir," Communications Officer Danny Wright reported, "we're being hailed by the Zilani Defense Command." "Put them through," Jake ordered. Admiral Zextor appeared on the screen, and Jake could see the exhaustion in the alien's black eyes. The Zilani military commander looked like he had not slept in days. "Human vessels, I'm Admiral Zextor. High Commander Vexhai told me you were coming, but I do not see your battle fleet. Where are your warships?" "We didn't bring warships, Admiral," Jake replied. "We brought evacuation ships." Zextor stared at him in disbelief. "Evacuation ships? The Devourers have consumed 2 of our worlds in the past week. They will reach Zilani Prime in 3 days. We need weapons, not transport vessels." Captain Ben Clark's voice came over the communication channel from the colony transport New Horizon. "Admiral, we're here to move your people to safety." "How many civilians need evacuation from the primary world?" 2.8 billion, Zextor replied automatically, then shook his head. "But you cannot possibly evacuate that many people in 3 days. It is impossible." Dr. Patricia Stone, speaking from the hospital ship Mercy's Hand, entered the conversation. "Admiral, we've done this before. The evacuation of New Singapore took us 4 days and we moved 3 billion people. The difference is that time we were running from a solar flare. This time we're running from something worse." Jake watched as more human ships appeared on the tactical display. The fleet had grown during the journey, with additional vessels joining from human colonies along the route. "Admiral Zextor, we need to begin evacuation operations immediately. Can you provide us with population centers and transport coordinates?" The Zilani Admiral hesitated. "I do not understand. You are risking your ships and your people for us. Why would you do this? We have been enemies." Chief Engineer Maria Santos, monitoring the conversation from her station, spoke up. "Admiral, we don't help people because they're our friends. We help people because they're people." The evacuation began within hours of the fleet's arrival. Human ships descended toward Zilani Prime like a swarm of angels, each one carrying the means to save thousands of lives. Captain Sue Williams coordinated the southern continent evacuation, organizing a complex dance of transport ships that moved civilians from the surface to larger vessels waiting in orbit. The Zilani people had never seen anything like it. Human crews worked alongside Zilani civilians, helping families carry their belongings, providing food and medical care, ensuring that no one was left behind. Dr. Linda Foster found herself treating Zilani children who had been injured in the chaos of evacuation, using human medical techniques that worked surprisingly well on alien physiology. "The bone structure is similar to ours," she explained to her Zilani counterpart, Dr. Veltar. "The healing compound we use should work on your people as well." Dr. Veltar watched in amazement as human medical technology rapidly healed a young Zilani's broken arm. We have never seen healing this fast. How is this possible? We developed it during the colony wars, Dr. Foster replied while treating another patient. When you're fighting to survive, you learn to heal quickly or you die. On the planet's surface, the evacuation was proceeding faster than anyone had thought possible. Engineer Rick Thompson had converted his mining ship into a refugee transport and was working with Zilani dock workers to load families as quickly as safely possible. How many more? He asked the Zilani supervisor Krivan. 50,000 from this district alone, Krivan replied. But the devourers will be here soon. Perhaps we should evacuate the young ones first and leave the elderly. Thompson stopped what he was doing and looked at the alien directly. We don't leave anyone behind. That's not how humans work. We take everyone or we take no one. The Zilani supervisor stared at him in confusion. But this is not logical. The young have more life ahead of them. Maybe, Thompson replied, continuing to load refugees. But the elderly have more life behind them, and that life has value too. Besides, who's going to tell the young ones that we left their grandparents to die? As the evacuation continued, the devourers grew closer. Their bioships moved through space like living nightmares, consuming everything in their path. Long-range sensors showed them feeding on the outer planets, stripping away atmosphere and biomass until nothing remained but dead rock. The first attack came on the second day of evacuation. A small group of devourer scouts attacked the evacuation sites expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they found something they had never encountered before. Commander Jake Peterson led a squadron of converted freighters in a desperate holding action. His ships were not warships, but they were crewed by humans who refused to retreat. Using mining charges, industrial lasers, and sheer determination, they fought the bioships to a standstill. All ships maintained formation, Peterson commanded as his vessel shook under alien fire. We don't need to win this fight. We just need to buy time for the evacuation. The freighter Dancing Star, commanded by Captain Betty Moore, rammed a Devourer scout ship rather than let it reach the civilian transports. The explosion destroyed both vessels, but it saved a transport carrying 8,000 Zilani refugees. Admiral Zextor watched the battle from his command ship and felt something he had never experienced before. These humans were dying for his people, and they were not even trained warriors. They were traders and miners and doctors who had volunteered to risk everything for strangers. Sir, his aide reported, the human vessels are requesting permission to evacuate our military personnel as well. Zextor was surprised. Our military? But we are warriors. We should stay and fight. Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication channel. Admiral, your people will need leaders and protectors in their new home. Dead heroes can't help refugees. The most touching moment came when Corpsman Danny Wright found a young Zilani girl named Krival crying in a ruined building. The child had been separated from her family during an air raid, and she was terrified and alone. Wright could not speak her language, but he shared his emergency ration with her and carried her to safety, singing an old Earth lullaby that somehow transcended the barriers between species. Dr. Stone, treating wounded on the Mercy's hand, watched human and Zilani medical staff working together to save lives. You know, she said to her assistant, a week ago these people considered us primitive savages. Now they're learning our medical techniques and asking us to teach them more. What changed? The assistant asked. Dr. Stone looked out at the refugee ships filling with Zilani families. We showed them who we really are, not with words but with actions. By the end of the second day, over 2 billion Zilani had been evacuated from their homeworld. The human fleet worked without rest, their crews taking shifts to maintain the constant flow of refugees to safety. Ships that had been designed to carry cargo now carried families. Medical vessels treated injured and sick without regard to species. Even human military vessels had been converted to carry civilians. The Zilani began to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. These primitive humans were willing to die for people who had shown them nothing but contempt. They were sacrificing their ships, their resources, and their lives for the simple principle that every sentient being deserved to live. High Commander Vex High, coordinating with the human fleet from his command vessel, sent a message to Admiral Hayes on Earth. Admiral, we understand now why your species is different. You do not help others to gain advantage or to appear strong. You help others because you cannot bear to watch them suffer. Admiral Hayes received the message in his office on Earth, where he was coordinating supply lines to support the evacuation fleet. Commander, he replied, We help others because someday we might need help ourselves. And when that day comes, we want to live in a galaxy where people help each other, instead of turning away. The evacuation continued through the night, with human ships working by artificial light to load the last refugees from Zilani Prime. Tomorrow, the Devourers would arrive in force and the real test would begin. But tonight, billions of Zilani civilians were safe aboard human vessels, carried away from certain death by people they had once called enemies. The galaxy was about to learn what humanity truly meant. The third day began with disaster. The main Devourer fleet arrived at Zilani Prime just as the final evacuation ships were leaving the surface. Captain Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Aurora's dawn as massive bioships emerged from hyperspace, their dark hulls blotting out the stars. "Captain," Lieutenant Lisa Park reported, her voice tight with fear, "the lead Devourer vessel is the size of a small moon. I'm reading energy signatures unlike anything in our database." The Devourer fleet moved with terrifying purpose toward the remaining human and Zilani ships. Unlike the random attacks of the scouts, this was a coordinated assault designed to trap the evacuation fleet. The bioships spread out in a net formation, cutting off escape routes to hyperspace. Dr. Patricia Stone was in the medical bay of the Mercy's Hand when the attack began. The hospital ship shook violently as Devourer energy weapons struck its shields. Around her, both human and Zilani medical staff worked frantically to stabilize patients before the next impact. "Doctor," called Nurse Janet Miller, "we're losing power to the surgical units. The wounded won't survive if we can't operate." Dr. Stone looked around the medical bay, filled with injured from both species. Zilani children lay next to human volunteers, all of them depending on her team for survival. "Transfer emergency power from the crew quarters. We're not losing anyone today." On the bridge of the New Horizon, Captain Ben Clark faced an impossible choice. His massive colony transport was loaded with over 2 million Zilani refugees, but Devourer ships were moving to intercept them. The transport was too slow to outrun the bioships and too valuable to risk in combat. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "we can reach hyperspace if we jettison the cargo bays, but that means abandoning half the refugees." Clark looked at the display showing families packed into every available space on his ship. Zilani parents holding their children, elderly aliens who had lived through centuries of history, all of them trusting humans to keep them safe. "Negative. We don't leave people behind. That's not who we are." The decision was made for him when 3 Devourer frigates closed in on the New Horizon. Captain Morrison, watching from the Aurora's dawn, knew that the transport would be destroyed within minutes unless someone intervened. "All available ships," Morrison broadcast, "form up on the New Horizon. We need to give them cover." Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner, the military liaison aboard the Aurora's dawn, was manning the weapons console. He had been skeptical of the mission from the beginning, but now he understood what they were fighting for. "Sir, we're outgunned and outmanned. This is suicide." "Maybe," Morrison replied, "but it's the right kind of suicide." The human ships that responded to Morrison's call were not warships. They were cargo haulers, mining vessels, and civilian transports. But they were crewed by people who would rather die than watch innocent beings suffer. Engineer Rick Thompson's converted mining ship was among the first to reach the New Horizon, using its industrial cutting lasers to attack the Devourer frigates. "This is Thompson." His voice crackled over the communication channel. "I've got one of the big ones on my tail, but I'm not going anywhere. These people are counting on us." The battle was desperate and one-sided. Human ships used mining charges as weapons, rammed Devourer vessels, and fought with whatever tools they had available. The Dancing Star, already damaged from the previous day's fighting, used its last functional engine to ram a bioship that was threatening a refugee transport. Captain Sue Williams, commanding an evacuation transport, found herself surrounded by Devourer scouts. Her ship was loaded with Zilani families, and she had no weapons capable of fighting the alien vessels. "All passengers prepare for emergency acceleration," she announced. "We're going to try something crazy." Using a technique learned from asteroid mining, Williams flew her transport directly into the gravity well of Zilani Prime, using the planet's atmosphere to slingshot around the Devourer ships. The maneuver worked, but the stress tore apart her ship's hull. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but Williams and her bridge crew were trapped in a section that was losing air. "Captain." Her engineer called over the intercom. "We can reach the refugee bays if we seal the bridge section. You'll be safe there." Williams looked at her controls, knowing that someone needed to pilot the ship to safety. "Negative. Get those people to the escape pods and launch them toward the human fleet. I'll keep the ship steady until you're clear." The refugees, both human and Zilani, were evacuated in the ship's escape pods while Williams remained at her post. Her final transmission was heard throughout the human fleet. "Tell my family I kept my promise. No one gets left behind." The greatest loss came when the Devourer flagship targeted the hospital ship Mercy's Hand. The massive bioship launched a concentrated attack that overwhelmed the medical vessel's shields. Dr. Stone and her staff had minutes to evacuate their patients before the ship was destroyed. "All medical personnel," Dr. Stone announced over the ship's intercom. "Begin emergency patient transfer. Move the critical cases first." Human and Zilani medical staff worked together to move wounded to escape pods and transfer shuttles. Dr. Linda Foster carried a young Zilani child who had been injured in the evacuation, while Dr. Veltar helped load human volunteers who had been wounded fighting the bioships. Dr. Stone called Chief Medical Officer Dr. Frank Walsh. "We need to go. The ship won't last another minute." Dr. Stone was helping an elderly Zilani who could not walk on his own. "Take the next group. I'll follow with the last patients," but there was no time. The Mercy's Hand's hull buckled under repeated impacts, and emergency systems began failing throughout the ship. Dr. Stone managed to get the elderly Zilani into an escape pod, but the launching bay was damaged. She had to operate the manual release, knowing that doing so would trap her on the dying ship. Her final message was broadcast to the entire fleet. "This is Dr. Patricia Stone. All patients have been evacuated successfully. Tell them we kept the Hippocratic Oath first. Do no harm." The Mercy's Hand exploded in a ball of flame that lit up the space around Zilani Prime. With it died Dr. Stone and 12 other medical personnel who had stayed behind to save lives. The loss of the medical ship galvanized the human fleet. Ships that had been retreating turned around to continue the fight. Captain Morrison made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "All ships," he broadcast. "This is Captain Morrison. We came here to save lives, and we're not stopping now. Form up on me. We're going to buy time for the refugee convoy to escape." Lieutenant Colonel Turner had volunteered for a suicide mission, leading a small group of ships in a direct assault on the Devourer flagship. His vessel, a converted freighter called the Determination, was not designed for combat, but it was crewed by people who refused to surrender. "This is Turner." His voice came over the communication channel as his ship approached the massive bioship. "We're going to show these things what humans do when you threaten innocent people." The small human force attacked the Devourer flagship with everything they had: mining charges, industrial lasers, even collision courses when their weapons failed. Turner's ship was the last to be destroyed, ramming the bioship's weapon array and disabling its main guns. His final transmission echoed across the battlefield. "Tell them we held the line." The sacrifice of Turner's group gave the refugee convoy the time it needed to reach hyperspace. Millions of Zilani civilians escaped in human ships, carried to safety by people who had given everything to save them. Admiral Zextor, watching the battle from his command ship, felt something he had never experienced before: shame. These humans were dying for his people, and they were not even trained soldiers. They were volunteers who had come from across human space to help strangers. "Sir," his aide reported, "the human captain is requesting permission to evacuate our remaining military personnel." Zextor looked at the tactical display, showing the remains of both fleets scattered across space. "Signal all Zilani vessels. We're abandoning Zilani Prime. These humans have shown us what honor truly means." The evacuation of the Zilani core systems continued for another day, with human ships working around the clock to move the remaining population to safety. Every ship in the human fleet was damaged, and they had lost 37 vessels with over 8,000 crew members. But they had succeeded. Every living Zilani in the core systems had been evacuated. Not a single civilian had been left behind, despite the cost in human lives. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Aurora's Dawn, looking out at the refugee convoy that stretched across space. Millions of Zilani civilians were safe aboard human ships, saved by people who had asked for nothing in return. "Captain," Chief Engineer Maria Santos reported, We're receiving a message from Admiral Hayes on Earth. Admiral Hayes appeared on the screen, his face showing both pride and sorrow. Captain Morrison, Earth Command has received reports of your actions. The President wants me to tell you that the entire human species is proud of what you've accomplished. Morrison nodded, thinking of all the people they had lost. Admiral, we did what anyone would have done. No, Captain, Admiral Hayes replied. You did what humans do, and the galaxy will never be the same. 6 months after the evacuation of Zilani space, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new orbital station above New Zilani. The planet below was green and blue, covered with growing cities where millions of refugees had begun to rebuild their lives. It was a world jointly administered by humans and Zilani, something that would have been impossible before the Devourer crisis. Captain, Admiral Zextor said, approaching from behind. The Zilani military commander now wore a human-style uniform, alongside his traditional medals. The construction of the new medical center is ahead of schedule. Dr. Foster's techniques have revolutionized our healing practices. Morrison smiled, remembering Dr. Patricia Stone and the medical staff who had died saving lives. She would be proud to know that her work continues. How are the integration programs progressing? Better than we ever imagined, Zextor replied. Young Zilani are learning human languages and human children are studying our history. Yesterday I watched a group of mixed-species children playing together in the Central Park. They do not see each other as different species. They see each other as friends. The transformation of Zilani society had been remarkable to witness. What they called the Great Humbling had changed everything about their culture. The proud warrior race that had once looked down on other species now worked as equals with humans, sharing their advanced technology freely for the first time in their history. High Commander Vex High, who now served as the Zilani representative to the Joint Council, had established new policies based on what he called the human example. The Zilani military was restructured to focus on protection and rescue rather than conquest. Their scientists shared research openly with human institutions. Most importantly, they began reaching out to other species they had previously ignored or dismissed. Dr. Sandra White, a human psychologist studying interspecies relations, was documenting how the human response to the Devourer crisis had changed not just the Zilani, but every species that had witnessed it. Her research station on New Zilani had become a gathering place for beings from across the galaxy who wanted to understand what they had seen. The psychological impact extends far beyond the immediate participants, she explained, to a gathering of mixed-species researchers. When other civilizations saw humans sacrifice themselves for a species that had treated them as enemies, it challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relations. The Corvin Federation had been the first to respond. These insectoid beings had maintained strict neutrality for centuries, refusing to get involved in galactic politics. But when they saw footage of human volunteers dying to save Zilani civilians, something changed in their collective consciousness. Ambassador Clicktar of the Corvin Federation had arrived at New Zilani 3 months after the evacuation, bringing with him offers of technology and resources. Your species has shown us that cooperation is stronger than isolation, he said through his translation device. We wish to learn from your example. The Stellar Republic, a loose confederation of trading worlds, had followed the Corvin example. Their representatives arrived with medical supplies and terraforming equipment to help establish New Zilani. Even the mysterious Shadowkin, beings who rarely interacted with other species, had sent messages of support and offers of assistance. Captain Ben Clark, who now commanded the New Horizon as a permanent refugee transport, was working with representatives from a dozen different species to establish what they were calling the Galactic Rescue Corps. The organization would coordinate emergency response across the galaxy, using the lessons learned during the Zilani evacuation. The idea is simple, Clark explained to a gathering of ship captains from various species. When disaster strikes anywhere in the galaxy, we respond together. No one faces extinction alone. The response to the Rescue Corps had been overwhelming. Species that had never cooperated before were volunteering ships and personnel. The Corvin Federation provided their advanced sensor technology. The Stellar Republic offered their vast shipping network. Even former enemies were working together toward a common goal. Engineer Rick Thompson, who had survived the battle at Zilani Prime, was now working on joint human-Zilani deep space sensors designed to detect threats like the Devourers before they could spread. His converted mining ship had become a mobile research platform, crewed by scientists from multiple species. The sensor network should give us early warning of any similar threats, he explained to Admiral Morrison, who had been promoted after the successful evacuation. But more importantly, it will help us coordinate rescue efforts when natural disasters occur. The most remarkable change had occurred in the youngest generation. Children who had been evacuated from Zilani Prime were growing up alongside human children on New Zilani, learning to see cooperation as natural rather than exceptional. Schools taught mixed species history, emphasizing how different civilizations had worked together to overcome challenges. Young Krival, the Zilani child who had been rescued by Corpsman Danny Wright, was now fluent in English and served as a translator for newly arrived refugees. Wright, who had retired from military service, worked as a counselor helping traumatized children from both species adjust to their new lives. "She teaches me as much as I teach her," Wright said, watching Krival help a group of young refugees learn basic English phrases. "These children don't carry the prejudices of their parents. To them, helping others is just what people do." The technological advances resulting from human-Zilani cooperation had benefited both species enormously. Zilani energy systems powered human ships more efficiently than ever before. Human medical techniques combined with Zilani genetic knowledge had produced treatments for diseases that had plagued both species for centuries. But the most important change was philosophical rather than technological. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was possible between species that had previously been enemies. The example set by humanity during the evacuation had proven that mercy could be stronger than vengeance, that compassion could triumph over prejudice. Chief Engineer Maria Santos, now serving as head of the Joint Engineering Council, was working with Zilani scientists on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone. Their latest development was a new type of faster-than-light communication that could coordinate rescue efforts across vast distances. The Zilani taught us about quantum entanglement communications, she explained to a visiting delegation. We taught them about redundant safety systems. Together we created something neither species could have built alone. The success of New Zilani had inspired similar projects throughout the galaxy. The Corvan Federation was working with human colonies to develop improved agricultural techniques. The Stellar Republic had established joint trading posts that served multiple species. Even the Shadowkin had begun sharing some of their advanced stealth technology for search and rescue operations. Admiral Hayes, now retired from Earth Command, visited New Zilani regularly to observe the progress of the integration programs. He was particularly interested in the mixed species crews that were becoming common throughout the region. 50 years ago, he told Captain Morrison during one of his visits, the idea of humans and Zilani working as equals would have been considered impossible. Now we have mixed crews throughout the fleet, and they work better together than either species did alone. The most significant development came when Engineer Santos detected unusual energy signatures from the galactic core. The readings suggested that the Devourers had been fleeing from something even more dangerous, and that this greater threat was now moving toward the inhabited regions of the galaxy. The sensor data indicates a massive disruption in the galactic core, Santos reported to the Joint Council. Whatever drove the Devourers into our space is still out there, and it's coming this way. But this time the galaxy would not face the threat alone. The alliance that had formed around the rescue of the Zilani was now a permanent confederation of species, committed to mutual aid and defense. They had resources and coordination that no single species could match. President Rodriguez, now in her second term, addressed the Galactic Assembly from Earth. When the Zilani faced extinction, they asked for mercy. Humanity answered with something better than mercy. We answered with hope. Today, that hope has grown into something that spans the entire galaxy. The final scene of the Great Transformation took place in the central park of New Zilani's capital city. Children from 6 different species played together while their parents watched from nearby benches. Human and Zilani, Corvan and Stellar Republic citizens, even a few young Shadowkin, all learning that cooperation was natural and conflict was a choice. Krival, now 16 and serving as a youth ambassador, was teaching a group of mixed-species children an old Zilani game, when she noticed Corman Wright watching from a nearby bench. She ran over to him, speaking in the mixture of English and Zilani that had become common among the young people. "Uncle Danny," she said, using the title the children had given him, "will you tell them the story again? About how humans came to save us?" Wright smiled, remembering the desperate battle above Zilani Prime and the price that had been paid for the rescue. "Which part do you want to hear?"